I think this is going to end his presidential run or any chance he has to win, Neil. And I want to go through a list here why there's greater culpability than he wants to admit. He has been a member of this congregation for 20 years. He has said he's proud of his pastor and his church. He is his friend. He is his mentor. He is his trusted advisor. On the day that he announced that he was going to run for president, he disinvited the pastor and, according to reports, said, well, you can kind of get rough in those sermons. He knew that his pastor went to Tripoli to meet Gaddafi with Louis Farrakhan, one of the biggest racists and anti-Semites in the country.
But
he didn't leave his church when his church gave a Lifetime Achievement Award to Farrakhan. There is no excuse. Not only, Neil Bortz, is he unfit to be a senator, he is certainly unfit to be president.
Sean,
someone who worked as secretary to a president of the United States, should this have any effect on whether somebody is fit to serve, could be a good president, has the right policy positions, simply based on who his pastor happens to be?
Alan, I think you have to be consistent. And the White House press corps and the political press corps in 2000 hounded George Bush when he went to Bob Jones University. They were on him for 2 weeks in a major media frenzy. They forced him to apologize, and there would be a storm if George Bush went back to Bob Jones. The press did the same thing to George Bush because Ken Lay was his friend, and when Enron went bankrupt, the press tried to blame Enron's bankruptcy on George Bush. The same standard has to apply here to Barack Obama. Barack Obama doesn't hold these views, but Barack Obama is not running for state senator. He's running for president of the United States. He is to 100% totally sever all ties to this radical. The things he says are abominable. No president should associate in any way with it.
Let me follow up on that, Bob Beckel. I think there's a good point here that Tony is making, and that is he said if he had heard this, he would have quit. Now, there's a couple of problems I have, as I mentioned earlier. Why didn't he quit when his church gave a Lifetime Achievement Award to Louis Farrakhan? And after 9/11, when his pastor said America's chickens have come home to roost, if there's evidence that he was there on 9/16 of that year, or any of these controversial dates, I think Tony's right.
Well, Tony may be right, although let me say this. I don't remember Ari Fleischer from the White House press podium, or you, Sean, saying anything about Pat Robertson when he accused gay people of 9/11, number one.
Can we stay focused here?
Oh, yeah, I sure did, Bob. I got asked about that. I got asked about that, and I said the president firmly disagrees.
If that's the case, I
and that's my
that.
point. The mainstream media focuses on that.
I do not remember your administration speaking out. But listen, let me ask you
Bob,
this.
you weren't watching.
Is it not fair to Barack Obama? Major asked him some questions. Let's get the tape of what was said when his daughters were baptized there, and see if anything like this.
What does that have to do with anything?
Let's get the tape. Wait, let's get the tape of what was said when he was married. And let me ask you one last question, Sean. Is every little child that goes through that church, because this guy was the pastor, does that mean they're not qualified to grow up to be president of the United States?
Can I say this? You got to give me time to answer.
Can you answer my question? Are they not qualified to be president of the United States?
I love this.
Keep going, Bob.
I will tell you this. I would not take my kids to a church where
Are those children in that church qualified to be president of the United States?
Bob Beckel, please let me finish. I wouldn't take my church.
You'll answer my question.
I wouldn't take my child to a church where the pastor said GD America, where they said the U.S. KKKA of America, where the pastor went on to say the chickens have come home to roost after 9/11, where he claims the United States started the AIDS virus, that America is the #1 killer in the world, that we're responsible for importing drugs and training professional killers. I wouldn't go to that church.
So the answer to my question is every child that went through there is not qualified to be president of the United States, right? According to you.
Is that right? Come on.
So every child that went through that church,
you answer your own question. You ask your own question and answer it.
That is a wonderful message.
It's not his own personal pastor or his church, but still he accepts the endorsements. He calls this guy his spiritual guide, and we have all these statements, anti-Islam, anti-gay. Should John McCain distance himself similarly from people who make these bigoted, hateful statements?
I wonder if you, Alan, are going to distance yourself from these comments. Honestly, I mean,
don't turn it around on me. Answer my question about John McCain.
I think that your question shows that there is clearly a bias that you have for Senator Obama, and I think that what has happened with this reverend is absolutely shameful.
You're refusing to answer my question, Melanie. You have a bias.
Americans across the country are horrified by this kind of language. When I go to church, I don't go to church to hear somebody talk about separating the races. I go to church to hear about the good Lord talking
ducking
about
my
love
question
forgiveness
and do
for
not
all,
want to answer
even
it.
for you, Alan.
All right, Melanie, I'm sorry you refused to answer my question. Don't laugh, she said. By the way, should we then be asking these questions about people who John McCain calls as spiritual guides?
But it's not his pastor for 20 years.
Spiritual guide.
20 years.
Does he have to answer questions about people who he calls his spiritual guide? Should those questions be answered?
You're stretching. Good
Should
luck.
those questions be answered?
I wish you the best, but we're out of time.
What are you, Melanie Morgan?